Welcome to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Crow Country. I play on the PS5, it's also available on the PS4, Xbox Series, and PC. Also, fair warning, I'm probably not going to have a video next week, because the next game coming out comes out on Tuesday, so I'm just not sure if I'd have time. Okay, so let's get into the story of Crow Country. You play as a girl named Mara. She is there to investigate a rundown theme park where some really weird shit is going down. You stumble upon weird corporate stuff that's probably illegal, as well as some weird creatures and some kind of weird folk investigating what's going on as well. And I'm gonna say right away, I actually really enjoyed the story. They got me very invested. Reading all the documents of what was happening, they were just the right length. None of them were so long that you're starting to be like, I'm losing interest, but they were just long enough to feed you the information you would need to start piecing the story together. Which that, in my opinion, is just fantastic writing, which is key to any great story, and overall, I really did enjoy the story. I was happy with it. Now let's get into the audio, and there is no voiceover work, so back to the story and writing. They have to do a lot with just the script, because you're just reading this text, and they do a great job giving each of the characters, well, their own unique personalities. The writing gives them plenty of character. As for the rest of the sound effects, they are fairly retro, which makes sense because that fits with the aesthetic of this game because it's meant to be a retro looking game. Which, I'm not gonna lie, it hurts me to say retro because it is PS1, which is quite old, but at the same time, it's something I grew up with, so considering that retro kind of hurts me on the inside. But that being said, the sound effects really work. I think they did an awesome job designing sound effects that feel old and at the same time fit in the world very well. Whether it's the creatures, the gunshots, there is one sound effect that did annoy me. I got these shoes that made me run faster and the squeaky noise they made. I didn't like that, I'm gonna say that. I should say they do a good job building the spooky atmosphere with the sound effects that they have just around the park, the creatures, etc. Not just making them feel retro, but making them good and spooky. I think effort was clearly put in. Which that ties into the music as well, because I think the music is incredibly well done. It's a higher quality than I was expecting based on the whole retro nature of this game, and I think that works phenomenally. I think they do a great job using it to help build the atmosphere as well. Now let's move on to the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and you may have pieced some of this together, but this is a survival horror game. And when you look at it, it has kind of an isometric camera angle, but you actually have a good amount of control over the camera, so I really enjoyed that, although it admittedly took me a minute to comprehend that. I'm just so used to not having that amount of control over isometric cameras, but once you get used to it, it comes in really handy, and not using it right away is just dumb. But that being said, it functions like an old school survival horror game. Although admittedly, the survival elements were a little weak in my opinion. I was never really crunched for healing items or ammo, but that's also because I found it very easy to avoid the enemies. You don't have to go around killing everything. In fact, I killed very few enemies overall. I really only killed the ones that I absolutely needed to complete a puzzle. And by complete a puzzle, I mean they were just interfering with me. If I couldn't safely get to what I needed to, I would kill an enemy, but that happened very rarely. I probably killed less than a dozen enemies throughout the game. That being said, if you want to run around just smoking them, you totally can. I really didn't notice any consequences in the story as to whether or not I smoked some or did not. But as I mentioned, there's plenty of puzzle solving, this being a survival horror game, like a classic survival horror game. You're running all around the theme park, gathering items and then solving problems, and I ended up gathering way more items than solving problems. Like, I gathered a crap ton and then went and solved a bunch of the puzzles before really progressing. Not intentionally, just because I was scrambling around not finding what I needed for the longest time, then I'd find it and then I'd go find something else, and yeah. Either way, it definitely has that vibe and it does an awesome job with it. Ooh, I should also say that this game comes in two game modes, one that is more classic survival horror and then one that is essentially just story driven. You don't have to worry about being attacked, you could just run around and experience the story, the mystery, etc. But quite frankly, I didn't see the need for that after having beaten it. I don't know that that's a necessary game mode personally. Now let's get into the controls, and I'm gonna say that I think the controls work well. I don't necessarily love the aiming. The camera angle mixed with the ability to more or less free aim was kind of weird and hard to get used to, but the enemies are easy enough to shoot and you can work it very easily. Now let's get on to the graphics, and as I've already mentioned, this is very much meant to look like a retro game, very much PS1 era, which I really appreciated because so many games are going for the pixel art, which I know I bitch about a lot. So it's kind of fun to see a game go for a retro style that isn't pixel art, that is in fact honestly very reminiscent of a cleaned up like Final Fantasy VII is what I would compare it to. But I think they did an awesome job with it in ways that I wasn't necessarily expecting, and adding character to, well, the characters. Like if you just walk around as Mara, she walks around in a way that's got some sass to it. You can tell she's a feisty gal just based on the way she's walking about. But they add stuff like that to some of the characters and you get a sense of who they are just based on the design, based on animation, which I think is impressive, using these old school graphics and then bringing that modern level of detail to it. That being said, I'm not saying graphical detail because this game looks like a PS1 game. So it's not the prettiest thing you're ever gonna look at, but that being said, they do an awesome job with the design. I was really impressed with it, whether it's the creature design, character design, or the theme park itself. I think they put so much effort into what they were building, and it's very carefully and beautifully crafted, doing all the different zones that are in the theme park, because, you know, theme parks have these different zones. You've got like a water zone, you've got a spooky zone, because honestly, overall, the theme park has kind of a spooky-ish vibe to it. Not just being a horror game, I think it was probably a kind of spooky theme park to begin with, but it does a great job building a spooky atmosphere. They did awesome with just kind of the weird design of the theme park that makes it already kind of uncomfortable, but then with the weird creatures moving around and ye oldie graphics, I just think they built a really well crafted experience visually, and I think what they were going for very clearly comes across, and I just really dug it, honestly. So to get into the wrap up, my two biggest complaints are that I hadn't saved for a minute, the game had an update, and I lost like 10-15 minutes of gameplay, and the squeaky shoes. Honestly though, this was a great game. I really enjoyed the throwback nature of it. I think they told a great story. I thought it was a unique take on the gameplay for a survival horror game, specifically the camera angle. I think they did an awesome job marrying kind of old survival horror with more modern survival horror in the controls and gameplay. Just, I have nothing but praise for this game. I think it was really well made. I think everybody should go and play this game. Okay, in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, do you love theme parks? What's your favorite kind of ride? I'm personally a roller coaster guy. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.